I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and once again we are looking at Space Invaders Through the Ages. Now, depending on where you lived, this game had one of several different names. In some places, it was known as Majestic 12. In some, it was known as Space Invaders Part 4. But here, on the Sega Master System, we're calling it Super Space Invaders. This one has an exceptionally long intro section, which is probably a good thing because, according to several sources that I've read about this version, the instruction manual for the Sega Master System had a comprehensive history of Space Invaders. So it would only make sense that if they put that kind of extra effort into the manual to go with the game, they might put that kind of extra effort into the intro sequence for the game. But if you ever wanted a plot to go along with your Space Invaders, this one definitely fits the bill, at least as much so as the Space Invaders for PlayStation almost a decade later. This came out in 1990 in arcades and 1991 for a wide variety of home platforms. And on that note, some sources will refer to this as Super Space Invaders 91 because of the release date. Now, if you don't want to track down an import copy of this for Sega Master System, since of course it was not released in the United States, there were only 114 North American Sega Master System games, you can play Space Invaders 91 on one of those other platforms like ZX Spectrum or Atari or whatever else it was on. But you can also play the arcade version, Majestic 12, on the Space Invaders collection that just recently came out for Nintendo Switch. Now, sadly, that too is an import, unless somebody gets their heads out of their collective behinds and decides to do a North American release of the Space Invaders collection. But in the meantime, it is an option. You could probably purchase it digitally through the Nintendo Nintendo Switch Online shop. Anyway, you know what I meant. The point is, if you could set up a Japanese account and pay through that, you could get it without having to buy a physical copy. But then if you don't buy the physical copy, you don't get the download code for Arkanoid vs. Space Invaders, which I featured previously on this channel. So, really, it's all up to you. But if all else fails, just play it in emulation, which is what I'm doing right now to record this footage and show you how it works. And the opening wave, pretty much a standard Space Invaders wave, aside from the fact that when you shoot the UFOs, they drop power-ups. Some of them freeze time, some of them give you the familiar bases that you can use to block enemy shots, some of them power up the effectiveness of your shots. It's the first time, at least as far as I know, where the UFOs exist for some reason other than to give you bonus points when you shoot them down. Now you'll notice the wave formats change from one to the next in Super Space Invaders. In this one, each column drops down one row towards you. That is to say, when you shoot the bottommost alien in any row, another one drops down to take its place. And there are other variations. There are staggered waves, there are waves where they just have a double wide when you shoot them, that like you shoot them and you didn't really shoot them. You see right there, they expand in size, so you have to hit them again to destroy them. It takes 2 shots or multiple shots. So there's a lot of variance here that actually establishes a flexibility for Space Invaders that was a necessary bridge to the future of things like Space Invaders Extreme on Nintendo DS. If they didn't start changing it up a little in the 90s, then we could have just had the same Space Invaders forever and ever and ever in every single port of it. Not that that would necessarily be a bad thing, because you know me, I like classic Space Invaders, but I think Space Invaders Part 4 does some fun and interesting things with the formula that make it worthwhile. And I have to say that for whatever power the Sega Master System has, this doesn't seem to be a poor port of it. It plays very smoothly. It's very fun to do. And you can see we've got this special cattle mutilation wave here, where the higher up the UFOs are, the more points you get for hitting them. There's even a helpful scale on the side that shows you their point value. And if they get to the cattle and take them, you lose bonus points. And if you shoot the cows trying to get them back, you lose points for that as well. So there's a lot going on in the cattle mutilation wave, but it's a nice, fun little reference to the fact that UFO conspiracy theorists believe that aliens abduct cattle and perform barbaric experiments, turn them inside out. I mean, you've all seen the episode of South Park where they have the cows that all the weird things happen to. Very first season of South Park, a very famous episode where Cartman gets an anal probe and the satellite is communicating with the aliens who are mutilating the cattle. There's a lot going on in that episode. There's a lot going on in this game. So Super Space Invaders is one that's deviating far from the original Space Invaders formula, but I think it does so in a very good way. It was a necessary bridge from the 1970s to the 80s to the 90s to keep the Space Invaders formula fresh and find some way to make it relevant, not just for the arcades where pumping in quarters was the name of the game, but for home consoles as well. When they ported it, they had to have something other than just the same Space Invaders game over and over again. So I think it succeeds on all of those fronts, and this Sega Master System port of it is an excellent place to start. But it obviously will be inferior to the version on the Space Invaders collection for Nintendo Switch because that is an arcade-accurate port. So if you want to play the best version of Majestic 12, that would be the place to go. But either way, you would have to import it to get a physical copy, so make your choices. Use an EverDrive if you must, do emulation if you need to, but I would recommend experiencing this version of Space Invaders any way that you can. Even if it's not this Sega Master System version, I could say safely Super Space Invaders, Majestic 12, Part 4. Call it anything you want. As long as you play it, you're doing something good. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is Space Invaders Through the Ages. Like, comment, subscribe, you know all the stuff to do. And as always, thank you for watching.